The smell of roasted coffee beans and freshly baked pastries had been the scent of my life for as long as I could remember. Our family cafe, the Golden Bean, stood proudly at the corner of Maple Street, a place that carried decades of laughter, hard work, and legacy. My father, Richard Bennett, built it from nothing, and I had grown up believing it was our shared dream. I was the middle son, Noah Bennett, the one who spent sleepless nights redesigning the menu, modernizing the business, and bringing in new customers through social media. I wanted my father to see me, to be proud of me, not just as a son, but as a builder of something greater. But that pride never came. To him, my older brother Ethan could do no wrong. He barely showed up for work, yet my father spoke of him as the future of the cafe. Every compliment that should have been mine went to him. I told myself it didn't matter. That family was worth more than recognition. But there were moments when I sensed something wrong beneath the surface. Quiet whispers, hidden expenses, and a tension in my father's voice whenever the topic of money arose. I brushed it off as stress, never imagining that a storm was building behind the peaceful hum of espresso machines. The Golden Bean was our pride, our story, our everything. I didn't know it then, but it would soon become the battleground where loyalty, betrayal, and truth would clash, and my family would never be the same again. It was a quiet Thursday morning at the Golden Bean when my father gathered everyone for an announcement. His face carried that familiar pride, the kind he reserved only for my older brother. Ethan stood beside him, flashing a grin that could sell sunshine on a rainy day. "I have big news," my father began, his voice thick with joy. "Ethan's getting married." The cafe erupted in applause. Customers, staff, even strangers, clapped for the golden boy of the Bennett family. I forced a smile, clapping along as my heart sank a little. Ethan's fiancée, Clara, was from an influential family. Their wedding, my father declared, would be hosted at our cafe, the event that would bring prestige and attention to business. He handed Ethan full authority over the schedule, the catering, and every reservation. I froze when I checked the calendar later that day. The wedding date clashed with one of our biggest bookings of the year, a corporate event that would have paid months of rent and wages. When I tried to explain the conflict, my father waved me off. "Family comes first. Noah, we'll survive without one reservation," he said firmly. I wanted to believe him, but a strange unease settled in my chest, a whisper that told me something wasn't right. And deep down, I already knew this wedding wasn't just a celebration. It was the beginning of something that would tear us all apart. The week after Ethan's wedding announcement, the cafe buzzed with preparations. Decorations arrived daily, invoices piled up, and my brother seemed unusually busy, not with work, but with phone calls he always took in private. At first, I thought I was imagining things. Ethan had always been careless with money, but lately he seemed more desperate. One night, while closing up, I noticed the office door slightly open. The light was still on. Ethan's laptop sat on the desk, logged in. Curiosity got the better of me. I told myself I was just checking inventory records, but what I found chilled me to the bone. There were hidden invoices, unauthorized transfers, and deleted receipts, all connected to Ethan's account. Thousands of dollars missing, traced online betting sites and private accounts. My pulse pounded in my ears. This wasn't a mistake. It was theft. And worse. Some of the stolen funds came directly from the corporate client's deposit, the same one I'd told my father about. The event Ethan canceled wasn't a scheduling error. It was deliberate. He needed that money for his wedding. I sat back in my chair, hands trembling. Should I tell Dad? Would he even believe me? I remembered the way he had dismissed my warnings before, always choosing Ethan's side. Still, the truth couldn't stay buried forever. I copied the files onto a flash drive, my heart racing with every click. As I locked the office, I saw Ethan's shadow in the hallway, his eyes cold, a smirk on his face that made my stomach twist. "Working late, little brother?" he asked, his tone too calm, too knowing. I forced a smile, pocketing the flash drive. "Yeah, just making sure everything's perfect for your big day." But deep down, I knew the real celebration hadn't begun yet. The storm was coming, and I was standing right in its path. I didn't sleep that night. The evidence on that flash drive burned in my pocket like a secret too heavy to carry. Every memory of my brother, every laugh, every childhood moment, replayed in my mind, colliding with the ugly truth I had just uncovered. Ethan wasn't just reckless. He was a thief. And worse, he was willing to drag the family business, my life's work, down with him. By morning, I had made up my mind. I would confront him privately, give him a chance to explain himself before taking it to Dad. Maybe there was something I didn't understand. Maybe he'd show remorse. When I walked into his apartment that afternoon, he was lounging on the couch, scrolling through his phone, a drink in hand. "Hey, little brother," he said casually, "you look like you haven't slept." I placed the flash drive on the table. "I know what you've been doing, Ethan. The fake invoices, the withdrawals, the gambling. You used the cafe's money." His smile didn't fade. Instead, it twisted. "You went through my files?" he asked softly, almost amused. "You're stealing from Dad," I said. "If he finds out." He stood up, eyes suddenly sharp. "If he finds out, he'll believe me. He always does. You think you can destroy me with a few files? He'll think you made them up out of jealousy. You've always wanted what I have." His words cut deeper than I expected. But before I could reply, his phone rang. He stepped aside to answer, whispering in a tone that made my blood run cold. When he hung up, he glanced at me with a smirk. "You really shouldn't stick your nose where it doesn't belong, Noah." I left without another word, but I wasn't backing down. I'd heard enough to know he was in deeper than I thought. That night, I listened to his next phone call through the wall and recorded everything. It was proof, but proof, I would soon learn, doesn't always lead to justice. Sometimes it leads straight to betrayal. The next morning, I went to the cafe early, the flash drive in my pocket and my heart pounding against my ribs. I told myself this wasn't about revenge. It was about saving my father's legacy. I had the evidence, the recordings, the documents. Once Dad saw them, he would finally understand the truth. When he arrived, I asked to speak with him in private. He looked surprised, but followed me into the office. My hands trembled slightly as I placed the laptop before him. "Dad," I began, voice steady but low, "I need you to see this. It's about Ethan." I played the recordings. Ethan's voice filled the room, admitting the debts, arranging payments, laughing about using cafe money to cover them. Then I showed the bank statements, the fake invoices. Every piece fit perfectly. For a long moment, Dad said nothing. His face was unreadable. Then he stood slowly, his expression hardening. "This is what you've been doing?" he asked quietly. "Trying to ruin your brother before his wedding?" The words hit me like a punch. "What? No, Dad, I'm showing you the truth." But he slammed his hand on the desk. "Enough, Noah. I won't listen to your jealousy anymore. Ethan told me you've been acting strange, sneaking around, trying to make him look bad. I can't believe you'd stoop this low." I froze. My brother had beaten me to it. He'd poisoned my father's mind before I could even speak. "You're fired," my father said coldly. "Get out. I don't want you near this cafe again." The words echoed to me like thunder. I walked out silently, the bell above the cafe door ringing behind me, marking the moment my family turned into strangers. The days that followed felt like living inside a storm that never ended. My father hadn't just fired me. He'd erased me. My name was removed from the cafe's website. My keys were taken, and the staff were told not to contact me. Overnight, I went from a man who built the Golden Bean success to the ghost of the son who betrayed the family. I moved into a small apartment on the edge of town. The silence was heavy, the air thick with disbelief. I replayed every word from that final conversation, hoping I had misunderstood, wishing my father would call and say he was sorry. But he never did. Ethan's wedding went ahead as planned, a grand event with glowing lights, expensive suits, and fake smiles. Photos flooded social media. My father beaming, Ethan kissing his new bride, and the cafe shining as the perfect backdrop. The world saw a happy family. I saw the price of my honesty. Weeks turned into months. I took odd jobs, deliveries, part-time shifts, anything to keep my mind off the ache in my chest. Still, I couldn't ignore what I was hearing. Whispers began spreading around town. Customers complained that the Golden Bean wasn't the same. The quality had dropped, the service had soured, and Ethan's arrogance had begun driving people away. I passed the cafe one evening and saw my father inside, arguing with a supplier. His shoulders slumped, his hair grayer than before. For a brief second, I almost walked in, but then I saw Ethan, sitting comfortably at the counter, smirking as if he owned the place. That was the moment I knew. Karma was already working. I didn't need to fight anymore. The truth had a way of surfacing, and soon they'd both see what I had seen all along. But I didn't realize then that the storm wasn't over. It was only gathering strength, and its next wave would change everything. It was late one evening when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. The voice on the other end was sharp, impatient. A supplier asking about overdue payments, supposedly under my name. "I'm sorry," I said, confused. "I don't work at the Golden Bean anymore." The man sighed. "Funny, these invoices all have your signature on them. Your father said you handled the orders." My stomach dropped. After the call, I went straight to my laptop and began searching for the cafe's public business records. What I found made my blood run cold. Ethan had forged my name on multiple supplier contracts, hiding his own paper trail of theft and debt. He wasn't just draining the cafe. He was dragging my name into it. That night, I returned to the cafe after closing hours. From outside, I could see the lights still on in the office. Ethan sat at the desk, pacing, muttering to himself. I watched through the window as he stuffed cash into a small box, his hands shaking. It was over. I finally had everything I needed, proof beyond denial. Instead of confronting him, I took a different path. I sent an anonymous envelope to the tax department, filled with the forged invoices, transfer receipts, and the recordings I had once shown my father. Then I waited. 3 days later it happened. Police cars lined the street outside the Golden Bean. Customers stood outside, whispering as officers escorted Ethan away in handcuffs. My father stood frozen at the doorway, pale and speechless. The cafe was shut down pending investigation. News spread fast, and within hours, everyone knew the truth. Ethan had been stealing for years, and my father had refused to see it until it was too late. As I watched from across the street, a bitter wind swept through the air. I should have felt triumphant, but I didn't. All I felt was a hollow ache of justice that came far too late, and a family torn apart by denial. It had been a week since the cafe's doors were sealed shut. The once busy corner that smelled of roasted beans and laughter now stood silent, with yellow caution tape fluttering in the wind. I passed by every day, but never went near. I thought I was done with that place, until one afternoon, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, my father stood there. His eyes were sunken, his posture weary, and for the first time in my life, he looked old. "No, he said quietly, his voice trembling. "Can I come in?" I nodded, stepping aside. The silence between us was thick, filled with words we hadn't spoken for months. He sat at my small kitchen table, staring at his hands. "I should have believed you," he said finally, the words breaking as they left his lips. I was blind. Ethan fooled me, fooled all of us. I let my pride ruin everything. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to remind him how he threw me away like a stranger. But looking at him now, broken, regretful, I couldn't. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the old cafe keychain. "The Golden Bean is still ours," he said softly, "but I can't fix it alone." I stared at the key, the same one he'd taken from me months ago. "Dad," I whispered, emotion tightened in my throat. "Please," he said, "help me rebuild what I destroyed." For a long moment, I said nothing. Then, slowly, I took the key from his trembling hand. Not for revenge, not for pride, but because some legacies deserve to be restored, even after being shattered. Returning to the Golden Bean felt like walking through a memory. The chairs were overturned, the windows coated in dust, and the smell of stale coffee hung in the air. It was no longer the warm, bustling place I once loved. It was a shell of what used to be, but I wasn't there to mourn it. I was there to bring it back to life. My father and I worked side by side for the first time in years. He no longer barked orders or questioned my ideas. Instead, he listened. Every decision we made, from a menu redesign to new layout, felt like a small act of healing. We rebranded the cafe, stripping away everything Ethan had touched. I replaced the old sign with one that read, "Brewed with Heart." The community began to notice our efforts. Old customers returned, curious and hopeful, and soon laughter and conversation filled the air again. There were moments of tension, of course, painful reminders of the past that lingered between us. But every morning, when my father opened the doors and greeted customers with a tired smile, I saw the man he used to be slowly return. One day, a letter arrived from Ethan. It was brief, an apology from rehab, handwritten in shaky script. He admitted everything, asked for forgiveness, and wished us peace. I didn't know how to feel. Anger still lingered, but so did pity. Maybe some wounds take longer to heal than others. Still, as I looked around the cafe, alive once more, I realized something. This place wasn't just rebuilt with coffee and wood. It was rebuilt with truth, forgiveness, and the strength to begin again. The grand reopening of the Golden Bean felt nothing like the cafe I once knew, and that was the beauty of it. The walls gleamed with new paint. The air buzzed with fresh hope, and the aroma of roasted beans carried the warmth of second chances. As I stood behind the counter, arranging the first tray of pastries, my father walked in wearing the same apron he'd worn for decades. He looked at me, not as a son who had failed him, but as the man who had saved what he could not. "You did good, Noah," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. I smiled. "We did, Dad." The first customers walked in, familiar faces who once swore never to return. Their smiles, their laughter, their trust. It all felt like sunlight after a long winter. Later that day, I hung a small wooden sign near the entrance. It read, "Built on honesty, brewed with heart." I stared at it for a long moment, realizing how true it was. The cafe wasn't just a business anymore. It was a story of lost truth and redemption. Outside, the evening sun dipped behind the horizon, casting a golden glow over the windows. My father stood beside me in silence, both of us knowing that the past would always remain. But so would forgiveness. For the first time in years, the Golden Bean felt alive. And so did I.